So continuing this discussion on the sustainable, you said solving the great food puzzle. That's what we're talking about. And the tagline is right innovation, right impact, right place. Next up here is a framework for transforming the food systems at a national level, which should add up to a global framework, of course. All global warming is local, all sustainability has to be done locally, and then it has to add up. There is nothing like global sustainability, right? A framework for ensuring that approaches for implementing food systems transformation are informed by key transformation levers aligned across multiple policy processes and supported by implementation partners, all of which must be guided by national level targets that are ambitious enough to ensure health and environment outcomes ensure that the health and environmental outcomes are within planetary boundaries. We talked about planetary boundaries in another podcast. So how can a nation make sure that their food system fits within the planetary boundary? I guess if everybody makes sure, then we don't add up to crossing it. But it's not so simple. So don't take this too seriously. I'm sorry, but policy processes refer to nationally determined contributions, national action plan, national adaptation plans, national climate action plans, national biodiversity strategy and action plans, and land degradation neutrality. Other policies refer to country-specific policies to achieve health and environmental goals. So rich countries may have more specific goals for themselves and so on. So we start here with the current food systems. You have some external drivers or barriers, let's say, like ambition gap on both sides, just in terms of setting the goals, and you have planetary boundaries. Let's accept it for now, but these are basically, if you don't know very quickly, you take global outputs of like nitrogen products and you look at nitrogen cycle, and there are ways to see what is the safe level of global nitrogen we can allow without collapsing the system. So that's called the planetary boundary for nitrogen cycle. There is phosphorus cycle, of course greenhouse gases we talk about all the time. There is for biodiversity and so on and so forth. Globally aggregating these things is tricky because everything happens locally. So how can each country, it's like discussing mitigation at a country level. This has already been argued to be not a great idea because they don't necessarily add up to global goals. Okay, so you have to be careful. So here science is used to inform targets. So there's something called science-based targets, healthy and sustainable food systems, and you have national actions for food systems transformation. That's the framework this report is trying to provide. So we talked about transformation gap, implementation gap, along with ambition gap. So you have transformation levers, which of course include finance, trade, technology, education and knowledge, governance and institutions, and natural resource management. Each country has to do that, and within each country there has to be a command line, a line of command which goes all the way down to individual neighborhoods. So here you have highest impact levers are used in policies as a framework. Policy process, so you have nationally determined contributions, national action plans, biodiversity, land use, and other policies that are mentioned here. And then for implementation gap, partners provide support to help implement policies, and implementation of partners then are initiatives, coalitions. There is a truck, a garbage truck going by. So implementation partners are imagined to be initiatives, coalitions, businesses, NGOs and CSOs, community social organizations, governments and regional and multilateral, and food producers. So this is a framework, how you implement it and what initiatives, coalitions mean. is open to interpretation. But let's just start by looking at various implementations of new ideas or new implementations of old ideas. Just by accident, we are starting with India. Over diversifying India's food system, the National Millet Mission. The country and food system type India, food system type 2. I will try to add a word or two about this at the end of this podcast. Type of innovation, social, business, and financial. So that's disruptive. Levers amplified, increase diversity, develop alternative proteins, and promote traditional foods. Millets are basically less water consuming, more drought resilient, they are healthy, and traditionally they were a big part of the diet for India. Impact and climate change, diversifying impact and smaller change. Other innovations that could amplify the impact when coupled with other innovations like developing green fertilizers, which is a technological innovation, educational outreach to farmers, which is social, and promotion to consumers, which is a consumer focused innovation. This could lead to architectural impacts and major changes. So each one of these is a link that you can follow up. When combined with consumer and policy innovations such as promoting millet consumption and export, the diversifying impacts for India's smallholders and food systems at large. So millets can be grown by smallholder farmers who are a critical part of the national economy. Just in terms of if you just look at the contribution of agriculture to GDP, that may be something like 25%, but 60% of the employment can come from the food production system. It just means that there are a lot of IT jobs which pay higher, which make up for the GDP, but you want people to be engaged in a meaningful way, even though wages are much lower than an IT industry, let's say. Okay, so let me pull up here the report and try to obviously I don't have it here. Let's come back and do the type 1 type 2 later. So India has one of the highest premature mortality rates in the world. At the same time, India's middle class is one of the fastest growing in the world. As disposable income has increased, so too has the consumption of ultra-processed foods as well as meat and dairy products. Overconsumption of these foods is connected to increased rates of diabetes and cardiovascular disease and increased greenhouse gas emissions and biodiversity loss. Today, more than 100 million Indians are living with diabetes, and it is increasingly recognized that Indians need to increase their consumption of healthy, nutritious, and sustainable foods. To ensure consumers have access to these foods, the Indian government launched the National Millet Mission. I won't read more, but here is another nice infographic, which are always nice to look at, but details matter in terms of how you can transform that into action. Innovation can occur in a variety of settings and take many forms, including social, consumer, technological, business, and financial policy innovations. So you have technological, business and financial, policy, social, and consumer, which we mentioned when we read these. What do they mean? Technological innovations include digital agriculture, cellular agriculture, and genetic modification of crops and soil microbiome. The scope of technological innovation is generally to increase efficiency of production, reduce waste along the supply chain, and otherwise enhance the material sustainability of food systems, storage, refrigeration, etc., local energy production and such. Business and financial innovations include new business models or ways of financing, subsidizing, or taxing food products, food cooperatives, food buying clubs, community supported agriculture are examples of business innovations that provide consumers with more direct access to local, healthy, and sustainable food. What about policy? Policy innovations support the development of healthy, sustainable, and equitable food systems, including through new systems of regulation and economic incentives. Policy innovations can include basic income guarantees, supply management, protected designation of origin, investment in sustainable agriculture, and measures and incentives to reduce food loss and waste. The greenhouse gas emissions from waste can be as high as 6%, and even poor countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, developing countries like, well, I don't know if they consider themselves poor or not, but least developed countries, low income countries, China, India, everybody wastes food, which is a shame. What about social? Social innovations include those that elevate social benefits such as reduced poverty, increased worker safety and well-being, and improved food security and sovereignty. Generally, these benefits are also tied to food production and distribution practices. Community-led agricultural incentives, food hubs, mobile phone-based agricultural services, and indigenous traditional food restoration are examples of social innovations. Consumers innovation on the consumer's side. Consumer innovations include those that seek to nudge or otherwise change consumer practices, for example, to educate consumers on nutrition and food waste, or move consumer values towards more plant-rich diets. That's again a socio-economic cultural problem where place matters, because many cultures rely on meat as not just a protein source, but there are lots of cultural practices associated with meat consumption as a community get together, and so on and so forth. So the long table will come back and do, and let me pause and add some info about types of food that we mentioned. Okay, pause. So we are going to look at a table on the food system types and example countries. So there are 7 types, and they are split in, they depend on countries. Like Brazil, Colombia, Indonesia are in type 1, Kenya, India, Pakistan are in type 2, Iceland, Singapore, UAE are in type 7, and so on. Just as an example, type 1 food systems of this type are characterized by large numbers of smallholders, even if industrial food production dominates land area. In type 2, for example, food systems of this type are characterized primarily by smallholders. Nations have fewer hotspots or threatened irrecoverable carbon, perhaps because of degraded landscapes. So it's kind of a way to classify them. So let's leave it there, and just we'll come back and continue this discussion on how to I keep forgetting how to solve this great food puzzle. That shouldn't be so hard to remember, but I get into podcasts and then I forget what topic I'm discussing. That's scary. We are talking about solving the great food puzzle, the right innovation, right impact, and right place. Okay, we'll come back and continue.